Активные мероприятия, говорите? Будущее покажет. Добро пожаловать на виртуальный саммит UpCode.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Matt. I'm so excited about this interview. You know, usually when I do these podcasts, I have like a rich history of someone's career to look at and get prepped. For this conversation, I don't have that. Bill is an 18-year-old freshman in college who has already spoken at DEF CON, already spoken at Recon, and has a fascinating story about how he kind of nudged his way into security and nudged his way onto the stage. So I'm excited about this conversation. I hope you'll sit back and learn. And I hope Bill's story can help motivate some other kids, or if you're parents, help some parents guide their kids into security research, getting into hacking and trying to figure their way through this. So Bill, thank you very much, very, very much for agreeing to do this. Welcome. Can you spend a minute just talking about yourself and pronouncing your last name for me?
Yeah, sure. So as Ryan said, I'm a freshman in college. I'm currently studying computing security at the Rochester Institute of Technology. And I'm really into security, specifically Windows security. That's where a lot of my experience has been. And I'm really excited for a new talk I also have at Black Hat this summer, talking about demystifying Windows rootkits. So the pronunciation of my last name, it's okay if you get it wrong, but it is Demirkapi. It's a Turkish origin.
I'll get it right one day. The whole last name thing I'm familiar with. No one can pronounce my last name, so it's all good. Bill, you kind of zipped over the lead there. You and I got introduced to each other. I put out a tweet recently saying, listen, I'm sitting around with a lot of time to do. There's no live sports. If there's some newcomers or some other folks who want to help with submitting abstracts to Black Hat or any of the other virtual conferences, and you were the first person to reach out. And it was exciting to watch you write the abstract in real time, and then you just got accepted to Black Hat. So that's pretty exciting, except that this is not your first foray there. But before we get into what you're up to now, I want to go all the way back because your story is fascinating. When did you start, like, quote unquote, hacking? And like your first foray into messing around on computers, not playing games, not just like, because everyone is doing that from the time they're a baby, but like actual messing around.
Yeah, so I guess I would say, of course, the first laptop I got was in second grade. I was pretty young at the time, and since then I've been fascinated about the Hollywood hacker, just the stereotype. I watched The Matrix. It looked pretty cool, and I knew that's something I wanted to look into. But I really didn't start doing much until ninth grade, when I decided, I actually want to get into security. It looks really interesting.
What age is ninth grade for a lot of the international folks listening and watching?
Yeah, so I was probably around 14, okay. And so, yeah, it's still pretty young. But it was just when I wanted to say, okay, I actually want to get into this, not just think about doing security. And I really started with the web side of things, mostly, cross-site scripting. That was the first thing I learned. And but it was pretty much web focused for quite a while, until 2 years after 11th grade.
And 2 years after 11th grade, you and I talked before. You got your first like real research instincts from game cheating. And
yeah, exactly.
I'm a 50-year-old man who doesn't play games, so I'm not a gaming guy. I understand the game. It's really interesting because a lot of the older folks coming out of the 80s and the 90s breaking into cybersecurity came out of your same story. So tell that story about becoming a gamer and trying to figure out low-level security research.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started with just in general gaming for a long time. I used to play RuneScape all up until maybe 7th grade, and I was still into a lot of games before 9th grade as well. But in 9th grade is when I realized, hold up, I do not have money to keep paying for cheats. So I was like, guess I got to learn it myself. So the story behind that is, I started looking into some of the forums out there that where a lot of people came together and talked about cheating in video games. It was very difficult. I remember one summer right after 9th grade, I spent the entire summer just trying to learn how to make these game cheats, and it was just a lot of asking a lot of questions, because at the time, my background, I took a high school C++ course, but for example, I didn't know that adding two hexadecimal numbers backwards is the same thing as adding them forward, because I didn't think of it as just a different base. It seemed to me like a whole another concept. So it was going from scratch, and I was trying to make a cheat for a game with a very competitive anti-cheat, and one of the state-of-the-art anti-cheats that was running in like kernel level. So it was really going from scratch to being able to make something that bypassed such a prevalent product in today's gaming market. But yeah, so the story there was, I had a friend who was already very experienced with game hacking, and I just asked him a lot of questions, and by a lot I mean quite a few. Just going back and forth, him trying to explain basic concepts to me, and at the time, honestly, the final product of that summer was just duct taped together, code from other places, but it worked. And when it worked for the first time, that was like, I guess you could say a thrill for me, because it really made me want to continue the journey there, as thinking that I could do it. Over the summer, I remember I gave up several times, and it was mostly because it was just so difficult. Dealing with low level memory is not an easy concept to understand, especially when the only experience I really had was from a C++ course, one C++. But I just kept working through that, and even after I gave up after a day, I'd go back to it. And so from 10th grade on, I really just started to develop more and more of these skills that into game hacking. And I started to actually, write my own code and start game hacking from scratch, instead of just building off of what others were working on. But from this, I learned a lot of skills, because to make a game hack, first of all, it's a lot of reverse engineering the game, right? So you have to figure out where our stuff located inside the game's memory, because that's the stuff you use to make game hacks. And so that not only meant like opening up the game in IDA, but like that also meant actually, dynamic reverse engineering, trying to bypass the anti-cheat, which would protect, for example, you opening the memory of the game process. And so there was a lot of challenges involved in making my first game hack, that I ended up learning a lot of different topics at once. So it was honestly, it was one of the most valuable experiences I've had. Is just game hacking teaches you so much, and if you think about it, it's like a gamified way of teaching, because you're playing a game, it's fun, and you also in addition to that, have a thrill of you can have a thrill that your game hack works so well, you can just see everyone through walls. That it's a very fun feeling, and it really
Except for the
encourages
moral
you.
part about cheating in the game and
Yeah, of
fake
course.
winning.
Well, yeah,
I get it.
of course. But what I mean there is, though, that it's really encouraging. So even after you want to give up at some point, the gamified fashion of the entire just topic in general, game hacking, it really pushes you forward.
It's fascinating, because this is so you're in high school, there's something trips in your brain that, okay, this game thing and this game hacking and game cheating, that you got invested in and interested in it for an economic reason, to save money, and something tripped in your brain that, oh my gosh, this is a skill that translates perfectly to security. When did that happen? And can you
Yes.
explain to some of the kids watching, like, not only when did it happen, but what was it? What
Yeah,
was that
absolutely.
tripping
So
moment?
the summer before my 11th grade, I realized I was looking at these skills, and I was doing a lot of, reverse engineering and binary exploitation, and bypassing these kernel drivers, and writing my own kernel drivers even. And so at that point, I was like, it sounds like I have a lot of experience that actually translate well to the infosec industry. Now, I wouldn't say it was like a perfect, like, oh, this is perfectly applicable to infosec. It was more like this might be. I was still very, very uncertain, but I thought that I had the necessary skills that where I could really start a career in the infosec industry. And so what I decided to do was, for the next summer, I wanted to find an internship. And so this process was very grueling, but essentially my strategy was find any security conference I can go to, and then try to network
Wait.
there.
I want to set up this story, because I heard this story before, but I want to, let me just
Yeah.
put it on a mat for the audience, right? So Bill is a high school kid. This moment has happened where, okay, all this game cheating stuff, he start to match it to a potential career in security. So now he thinks, okay, now I need to go to security conference and I need to build my network. Now Bill is a teenager in the Boston area. So you're setting out looking for random security conferences on the internet to just go and build your network. Tell us what happens next.
Yes. So, well, the first conference I went to wasn't actually a security conference because I thought, even business conferences, that they're going to have the people that can, maybe get me an internship that could be good to network with. So the first conference I went to was called Business of Software. And there I actually met a lot of people. I didn't get an internship from it, but I still networked pretty well. And it was a lot of, corporate executives talking about how to write software and specifically the management procedures around that. And the general strategy there was to get into these conferences that normally cost you $3,000 or something for a ticket. Was I'd simply email the organizer, say, I'm a passionate high school student that's looking for I guess to network and to learn more. And the organizers were very well received it pretty well, and they said, of course, we'll let you in for free. So it was pretty awesome. And so the second conference I went to was called the Cambridge Cybersecurity Summit. And this was about more cybersecurity policy, especially with the public sector and how the private sector can work with the public sector. But so I, again, emailed the conference organizers there, and they were they received it pretty well. They said, absolutely, please come. And I remember the day I went there, I was wearing just a winter jacket and some jeans. And I got in there, and I noticed, wait a minute, literally everyone else was wearing a full formal suit. And then you saw me. I even remember when I walked in, the security there actually asked me, are you in the right place? And I said, yeah, yes, I'm a participant here. And so I got into the conference, and I was already networking. But then one of the speakers was the general manager at IBM. And right after he was giving a talk there, and during an intermission, right before we went back into the room, I saw that there was this split second where he was actually free to talk, because I didn't want to interrupt his conversations with everyone else. And I just basically ran up to him, and I gave him an elevator pitch about, hey, I'm a high school student and I'm really passionate for security. And I'm looking for an internship this summer. Can you help me out? And at first he was very reluctant. He didn't. He was unsure about what to do next. And I kind of said, is there a business card you can give me? And he wasn't the happiest about that. But he was like, you cannot share this with anyone else. And I was like, of course, of course. And he gave me his business card. And so after the conference, I sent him my resume, which didn't have much on it. But when I sent him the resume, he put me in contact with IBM Resilient, which is IR platform for IBM. He put me in contact with them, and then I had an interview, and things went from there.
And you got an internship at IBM from
the next summer.
From forcing your way into a $1,000 security conference for free, hanging out at the side of the stage and badgering the speaker, not necessarily badgering, but making sure that you were seen and heard and getting that business card. And the lesson here for the parents here and for the kids watching is a lot of this stuff for you does not happen until you go get it. Bill's got to go get it, right? I mean, that's the mentality you had at that point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not something that, I was really reluctant to even go to the conference, but I thought that the best way to get an internship like that, especially when I didn't have the formal backing, was through networking, because then they would be able to tell that I actually knew what I was doing. And then without that formal degree, for example.
Tell the people what you're up to now and how you got this one.
Yeah, so right now I'm interning for Zoom, and it's a really interesting story how I got that. It was pretty much just one night, it was 12 a.m. and I saw an article from Bleeping Computer about how Zoom was parsing UNC paths as a URL in chat. I was really confused. Why would any sane person in Zoom want that to happen? And so what I did was I popped open my Zoom. Instead of playing a game, I could have. And I just was curious. So I reverse engineered Zoom's chat functionality, and I found out that they were using Microsoft's Rich Edit platform to render these messages, and that's how their messaging system worked. And so then in that DLL, the MSFT edit DLL, I popped it open in IDA, and I saw that there was a function that actually checked if it was a hyperlink, if a string was a hyperlink. And when I just decompiled that function, I saw it immediately. There was a hard-coded check by Microsoft to that if a string starts with a / and then any character but a /, it was a UNC path. And so this is really interesting to me because it wasn't something that Zoom enabled. it was straight up just Microsoft's hard coded stuff in that function. So I just tweeted out about it just because it was something interesting I found. And then a few days later, the CEO of Zoom, Eric Yuan, he reached out to me and he said he was really impressed with the work I did there because he has a computer science background, and so to him he understood the difficulty of reversing that and actually finding the root cause of that bug. And so when he saw that, he set up a call for me, and then I asked him, are you interested in having a security intern for the summer? And he said absolutely. And so from there, think that now I'm working for Zoom.
That's awesome. So everyone start tweeting to Eric Yuan. There's like amazing jobs. I'm just kidding, but shout out to Zoom, shout out to Eric and Katie Masuris and Alex Stamos and my homies at Bishop Fox and all the folks working on getting things right at Zoom. Again, another example of Bill, showing the initiative and making the effort to put his, push his foot forward and use his research as his calling card and use his research as the resume. So again, for the students listening, wherever in the world you are, you got to go get it. And a lot of it is just showcasing your work and then finding places and stuff to do it. Behind you, there's a flag. What's the story with that flag? And tell me the story about your first DEF CON appearance last year. You spoke at DEF CON. How did you get in there? What was that like?
Yeah, so for it, actually, the research, for example, it was my first, you could say, subject of, I guess, penetration testing was really was my school's grading system. And I started there, I was like, okay, I know Perfect Target, something fun, because again, I wanted to gamify the experience for myself. So I was like, who wouldn't want to hack their own grading system? And so I started there. I just looked for basic web vulnerabilities. And I remember my first cross-site scripting. But as I grew those skills, those web penetration testing skills, I found a lot more vulnerabilities, like external XML entity inclusion or SQL injection. And being able to see, the plain text password of my peers, those sorts of things. As my skills grew, I kept improving by testing against my grading system and actually, learning more and more by actually using a real target there. And so in 11th grade, that was actually the first time I applied. I got denied. But I didn't let that discourage me because the next year in my 12th grade, I did a lot more research that was on specifically Blackboard, which was the company that was that we used school software from, and I found a lot more vulnerabilities, and I made sure to improve my talk to the point where there was a significant amount of vulnerabilities and an amazing story behind it as well, because there was complications such as Blackboard, the company that the school software company, I had to sign a contract with them. And then, but that whole experience was an amazing story, and I now had the technical backing to support that story, because DEF CON isn't like, war story plays. It's more about the nitty gritty stuff. And so then when I reapplied in 12th grade, I got in. And yeah, so this flag is a speaker flag they gave me for speaking there this past summer. You're muted, by the way.
Sorry, that's awesome. Congratulations again on that. Quickly, on the upcoming Black Hat Talk, what's the big lady and why should people come and listen to your talk?
Yeah, absolutely. So the big thing about that talk is that I'm going to be moving past just doing theory or just talking about different techniques that are possible to do. And a large focus of the talk will be my own rootkit that I wrote. It's called Spectre, and how it works is that it will hijack the user mode network stack so that you can communicate with the malware over legitimate ports. So for example, if you have some Windows services listening on on port 1234, the malware can be controlled by sending a specially crafted packet to that port, and then my hook in kernel will actually be able to intercept that and then read a command from that. But really, I wanted to the talk I'll be giving. It's not just saying here's stuff you can do, and this is a potential way of doing it, but it's actually applying that theory in an example rootkit that I'll also be releasing with my talk.
Thank you very much, Bill. Appreciate the time you spent to tell your story here. Best of luck with everything. Continue to hack the planet. A big fan of yours. I encourage all the kids to follow follow Bill's work on the screen right now. There's a QR code above Bill's head. I believe Matt has set that up to point to Bill's website or his blog. I'm not sure, or his GitHub. Above my head is a QR code there that points to my podcast, securityconversations.com. Head over there, subscribe, listen, help to share it. Bill, thank you again. Matt, thank you again for providing this opcode platform for to showcase some of these things. So I appreciate it, and thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you, guys. It's a pleasure to have you on the stream. Very interesting story. I was every time, it's always very interesting to know like how people get into like reverse engineering, especially now because bug bounties, like web application security is way more trendy, especially with the new generation. And I remember like when I guess when I was your age now, I met like Dino Daizovi, who is a pretty well-known like Mac hacker, but also did some Windows stuff. And even back then when I was talking with him about it, he was like, oh yeah, well, when we started, we all were running Windows 2000. So whenever we wanted to try something, like the barrier of entry was not as high, but like now, like the barrier of entry is even higher, especially if you want to do like, like operating system security. And that's pretty cool, to see that, there's still like a whole new generation of people being interested in it. And
it's really fascinating because I'd spend a lot of time talking to people about their careers, and there's so many folks who are CTOs and big engineering leaders at big companies like Microsoft and Google who came out of game cheating, who came out of this great game cracking world. So I mean, this is the natural evolution of what Bill is doing isn't unique to kids these days. It's just a different different platforms and I think Bill and these guys have it actually a lot easier because there's a lot more documentation about stuff and a lot easier YouTube videos and tutorials for everything. So if you're a kid these days and you want to be a researcher and you want to be a hacker, there's no excuse for not self-learning. Well, not that there's no excuse, but there's little excuse. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, like you still need to put the work in it, like I don't think there is like more easier or anything because there's more things to learn. So it's you can get in the noise like very quickly, even like just reading. But yeah, cool stuff, Bill. Let's check if the chat has any questions. So there is one person who has a question for you, Bill. Did you join RITSec? It's a CTF player who was asking.
Yes, I think I actually, so RITSec is the security club at the Rochester Institute of Technology, and I am a member there, and I did play in the CTF as well. I think I believe I got second place.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
How big is RITSec? Is it like a big group at the university or?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty big. I wouldn't say that all security students at the university are part of it, but there's a significant amount of people there. I'd say probably, I'd be speculating, but I'd say that there's 50 or more active members. If I had to estimate, I'm not sure personally.
That's pretty cool. That I mean, I always find it fascinating now when I hear like there's like security groups in universities. It's pretty cool because I remember when like all the New York people like started the security group at NYU. So I think it was like Stephen Ridley, like Dino Daizovi, Dr. Red. I think all those guys, they start. I think that I forgot who initially started it, but I was like, oh wow, that's really cool. But it's nice to hear that a lot of universities now have a lot of groups. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any question for Bill or even Ryan? Actually, I'm surprised that Costin and Juan don't have any questions for you. Oh, I scrolled. I scrolled down. I see a message from Juan. It's like, where can I buy those cheats? I need to beat the Vettel at Fortnite. Yeah, I mean, like, can you tell us slightly just for people who have no idea like about the P2C like model, like how big is that market? Because the thing is, a lot of people in the industry are very familiar with like the exploit market, mainly for exploitation, selling to governments or like vulnerability brokers, but very few people are familiar with how the P2C like market works and how they would even leverage vulnerabilities.
Yeah, sure. So the PTC market, I've mostly work. I what I've seen is the AAA games, the ones with the state of the art anti cheats. It's quite a lucrative market because of the high detection rate and because of how much is invested into the anti cheats. The cost of these cheats go up as well, and I know that there's a lot of cheats for those games with the state of the art anti cheats that can go for $100 a month or more. I've seen some even like for private leagues go for $1,000 just to get into these get into these pay to cheats, and so it's quite a lucrative market for the lower end games that might not have the high tier anti cheats. The idea there is that they sell them for cheap, but they do mass selling, so that means they'll sell to a significant amount of people, which will again make the same amount of money. And so the P2C market is still alive and well, and it's quite lucrative as well as because of the high entry to even make these cheats and keep them undetected. People charge a lot for them.
Would they use 0 days for P2C? So it means pay to cheat, if I didn't mention it before for the chat.
Sorry, what was the question?
Have you ever seen like some private or pay to cheat programs that were containing like 0 days for like local privilege escalation, like to load the driver and everything? Because even recently, I think it's Alex Ionescu who was tweeting, how can we all agree that driver signing is a joke, because he was pointing to a GitHub that was just showing that driver that was like signed and that like all those like features, so would you, because like for instance the Capcom driver actually comes from a well-known like cheater forum, and then it was used in a lot of malwares. So have you ever seen like P2C like stuff using like 0 days for like local privilege escalation or stuff like this?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say for local privilege escalation. The general idea is that customers that buy these pay to cheats, they can run as admin. I mean, it's an assumption. But for example, 0 days that I have seen a lot is in vulnerable drivers such as Capcom. For example, being able to read the memory of another process. There's a lot of drivers out there that require administrator, but that allow you to tamper with other processes. And I know that there's that cheaters do a lot of research into that, specifically, how can we abuse these drivers that may require admin, but that allow us to interfere with another process and bypass the kernel driver of the anti-cheat. And so the most 0 days I've seen is around that, not local privilege escalation. It's quite interesting as well, because a lot of the vulnerable drivers I found were also during the course of trying to make, a cheat, because vulnerable drivers are really hard to, first of all, prevent, because there's legitimate software using those vulnerable drivers. And it's difficult to detect because a lot of the times it can be a 0 day. It's not public known. And a lot of these vendors won't even consider it a vulnerability, because if you can read the memory of another process, but it requires admin for you to even talk to it, then it is not necessarily, because Microsoft wouldn't consider that a vulnerability, because they don't consider ring 3 to ring 0, administrator to ring 0 a security boundary, because once you have admin, theoretically you can do pretty much anything. So it's not even technically a vulnerability in the first place. But there are still a significant amount of drivers that are not known to be abused by game hackers, because that allowed them to interface with games memory.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think some even, because there's like multiple types of anti-cheats, right? Like you said, there is like the grade ones that would be using a driver and kind of like protect like the process of the game. And funny enough, I don't think I've seen any game using like protected process, like the feature of Windows. And then I think there's like some games that recently like are just using purely like userland like anti-cheats.
Yeah. So with that, the reason they don't use like PPL or anything like that is because Microsoft has stringent requirements to even enable that. You can get PPL for anti-malware. If you're an antivirus or something, you can get your process actually protected by PPL. But for games, the only way to do that would really be to direct kernel object manipulation. Go into the process structure of that process and then flip the PPL flag is to enable a protection. And a lot of anti-cheats won't do that. I haven't seen any anti-cheat do that, just because there's a lot of stability issues there. Now it's not documented, and it could cause issues later down the line when when there's a process that shouldn't be protected by PPL actually protected.
I see. And I think like recently in the news, we have seen Riot Games doing like a bug bounty for like the anti-cheat driver. Is this like the actual first vendor to do that, or is there more vendors to do that? And the bug bounty program is only for like vulnerabilities, so it's not even for techniques for bypass or anything, right? Is there like any other vendors like approaching like researchers, or not at all? Usually they're more paranoid.
So I have heard of some vendors doing private bug bounty programs before Riot Games, but Riot Games has been pretty much the only one I've seen actually like go through with it. And actually for bypasses like if you can get a DLL into the game, I believe they do actually consider that a vulnerability in the anti-cheat, because theoretically, a kernel anti-cheat, it should be able to prevent user mode attacks. So if you have like a user mode way of getting into the game process, that is they would consider that a vulnerability, as far in my experience.
Yeah, that would make sense. Okay, cool. Another question from the chat, just to move on the anti-cheat topic, from Costin Rio. Did you ask the school for permission before poking at the grading system? Is asking for permission important?
I think that asking for permission is important, but ninth grader me didn't really ask for permission. No. And that was primarily because I didn't know about some laws like the CFAA, and so I definitely think that now I definitely ask for permission for pen testing a target that isn't on like a local hosted thing. But at the time I did not ask for permission.
Cool. Well, I don't think we have more question. Well, thanks again for your time, Ryan and Bill. It was very interesting, and thanks again for sharing your story. And Ryan, thanks again for interviewing Bill.